Do we have confirmation of quorum?
Yes, you have a quorum.
Okay. Are we okay to start? Should I give it another minute?
My computer says 9:29, so I guess a minute or
One more
less.
minute? Okay. Beauty. Beauty.
Not enough time to have a smoke.
No. All righty. I see we hit 9:30. So we have confirmation of quorum and call to order. Adoption of the today's agenda.
So moved, Abram.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. I'll call question. Does anyone oppose? None carried or none. So carried. Thank you. Petitions and delegations. Seeing none. Adoption of the previous minutes.
So moved.
So moved. Kurt.
Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. Are there any errors or any omissions? Hearing none, I'll call question. Alrighty. Chair's reports. I do not have a chair's report today. So we can move to staff reports.
Move to proceed with
And
the staff report.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded.
Tina will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'll hand the floor over to Tina. Am I supposed to call question on it, or do I just hand it over?
Just hand over Tina. We're good. She's just figuring out the mic.
Yeah.
Beauty. Hello, Tina.
Good morning, CEO,
Good morning.
Chair. I just presenting the information on the 2.5 day First Nation governance and relationship building session.
Sorry, I think we're still on item number 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sorry, we are on the regional governments and reconciliation.
So I can give a quick overview if you like, Mr. Chairman. So at the, I believe it was a recent meeting of the First Nations Committee, they reviewed correspondence from the province regarding efforts to build reconciliation and regional governance involving First Nations. So the committee took that to the board, and the board recommended that a letter be drafted, and it's currently in draft form for review by the committee. And if the committee wishes to accept the letter or make changes or do whatever it wishes to do, and then that would go back to the board for confirmation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That the report of the CAO officer be received. Is that where we go? Oh, sorry, Director Abram, and then Director Cornfield after.
Yeah, I don't know if I should do it under receipt or if I should do it under, like is the letter itself under the receipt? No, it's not. Okay, so I'll wait till we get to B, if you could call on me then.
Okay, thank you. So that the report of the CAO be received.
I think Mr. Director Cornfield had a question on a receipt, maybe, or a comment.
Okay, yes, sorry, Director Cornfield.
That's
Yes.
okay. Kev, it's fine. We've had a long history of invitations to First Nations to participate as observers, as observer status. As you know, it was Cayuga Checklisset. Was sort of hit and miss as to whether we had any attendance. And I think we made it an invitation to all First Nations at one point, but because you were in treaty discussions at the time, Cayuga, Checkasset, KC, I guess for short. KC was the only ones that took us up on it, except even when we go back before we were two separate boards, I believe Comox came to the odd meeting in there. So what has changed that they would like us to do differently? Can staff advise?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm not sure that the province has asked us to do anything specific other than they were encouraging regional districts to consider the matter of regional governments inclusive of First Nations. And from the discussion at the meeting of the First Nations Committee, this was our understanding or impression of where the sentiment of the committee at that time was going with respect to having observers from First Nations, et cetera, invited, that kind of thing. So again, it's up for debate and discussion if you wish to make changes or enhance what's in the report.
Thank you. I was not at the last meeting, so thanks for the update. I will hold my other comments until we get to the second half of the item.
Okay. Thank you. So we're on item A, that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received. Is there a motion to receive?
Yes, that's on the floor for a vote. Thank you.
Okay. So what our next step would be to
Anyone
vote?
opposed to that?
Okay. Is there anyone opposed? Sorry. Hearing none. Okay. So that moves us to item B. Is that correct?
Correct.
That the draft letter from Chair Unger to the Minister of Municipal Affairs regarding regional governance and reconciliation be forwarded for the board's consideration.
I'll move that, Colburn.
Second.
Seconded by Director Cornfield. Thank you. And I see the two hands up. There's Director Abram and Director Cornfield. Director
Thank
Abram.
you, Kevin.
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, I think it would be appropriate, even though the letter came from the Honorable Josie Osborne when she was Municipal Affairs Minister, but she's not anymore. So it should probably be going to Nathan Cullen. I believe he's our minister now. So perhaps that could be changed. And if needed, it could reference somewhere in there that this is with regard to a letter from Minister Osborne, blah, blah, blah. So that would be one change. The second change is the last paragraph before the thank you. It's awkward. And I think that if it read that the Strathcona Regional District supports the involvement of other First Nations that choose to become full members of the regional board through treaty at our meetings. Well, it's going to have to be rewritten, but basically the sentiment is anyone that wants to choose to become full members of the regional board, they come as observers, first of all, so they get a flavor for what they're getting into. And that as a result of these relationships, we can be built through the rest of it's okay. But this is confusing, that other First Nations that choose to become full members of the regional board through treaty as observers to our meetings, if they are full members of the regional board through treaty, they're not observers. So it's contradicting itself. They're they're members. And this doesn't say that. So I think it should be reworded. Maybe it needs to be sent back to staff to reword that more correctly. Or if you can do it on the fly and do it here, that's fine. But I don't think it's correct the way it is written right now. So I can't support sending it the way it is. I
Yes.
support the letter, but it's just not right.
Okay. That last part that you'd like sent back to be reworded.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, otherwise, we're basically saying that you, Kevin, are even though you're a full member, you're an observer, and that's
Yeah.
not true. You're a full member of
If
the
I,
board.
if I may, Mr. Chair, it may be confusing to you. I'm not sure if it's confusing to other directors. It's not confusing to us. What happens is, while you're in treaty, you are an observer. You can participate as an observer. Then when your treaty is concluded, you can become a full member. So the sentence says that the SRD supports the involvement of First Nations that choose to become a full member through treaty as observers to our meetings. So if they choose through treaty to become a full member during that time, we would support and encourage them to be observers during that time.
That's the process that we went through with our nation, is that I was an observer on this board before I became a member.
Correct. And just to remind folks that the KCFN treaty had concluded, and there was a window of time that the KCFN could join as a full
know that.
member. So.
Okay, well, it still leaves the dangling words at the end of meetings. It says or otherwise. What does that mean? As observers to our meetings or otherwise. What otherwise is there? I just want to make it clear to the province that, as Charlie said, we have been inviting First Nations since the CSRD days, including the KDC, Comox Band, the Weewakai, Weewakam, and then more recent, and Comox at that time. And now more recently, we've invited others. So we have been in this process now for 10, 12, 14 years, who knows? So I think the province needs to know, hey, we're working on it and doing as you are requesting us to do, but we've been doing it for a long time, way before you asked us.
Mr. Chairman, I could perhaps respond to Director Abram if you wish on the otherwise part of it.
Yes.
I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe the intent was to look at or to encompass other arrangements that may not include sitting at board meetings either as observers or members, but it could be service agreements, it could be any number of other things that don't fall into those two particular categories. So again, if the committee doesn't feel that's appropriate, then we can certainly try to strike that out.
I still have my hand up.
Thank you. Yes, Director Cornfield.
So my thoughts are very much similar to Director Abrams. My understanding of the notice was that the government wants to see us improve on what the way we're doing now in terms of reconciliation. That means reaching out to encourage more involvement. I agree with Director Abrams. The last paragraph says that, yeah, if they should choose to become members through treaty, but really, I think that what the province is asking us is how can we involve First Nations governments in how we do business? And I think it's important to note that under our letters patent and legislation, it does not allow participation in voting, but it doesn't restrict us from having anyone invited as a observer, to give them observer status. And I think the key words is that they would like to see us work with First Nations of all the different nations, whether they're in treaty or not, to get them more involved. If we wait until there's some nations that don't want to follow the treaty process, and that's their choice, and I think we should respect that. It doesn't mean that their values and their thoughts and ideas and their territories shouldn't be considered when we do business. And so I think the letter needs to be clear that we've been doing it for a long time. I would suggest that we should be inviting any First Nation that wishes to become involved, that they be given observer status and start that involvement. Whether we get uptake or not, I don't know. We'll see how good the letter is. So I think the key thing is that we reach out and say, hey, we would like you to become involved. And that's what the letter should say. And this is how you do it. And this is a letter back to the minister that says, right now, legislation, our letters patent, don't allow full participation, but we are encouraging all others to get involved as observers. And it's nice and simple, and it's clear, and that's what the board needs to vote on. So, my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Cornfield. Do we have any other
Could I
any
make
other speakers?
could I make a comment? I'm here in the boardroom, Chair Jules.
Yes, go ahead.
Morning. So, and I think that this is good enough to go to the board. I would probably move a very slight amendment that would include continued engagement, because I believe that's what Director Cornfield is talking about. So when I read this last paragraph, how I read it was supports the involvement of other First Nations that choose to become members of the regional board through treaty as observers to our meetings or otherwise. So more of that emphasis on the comma that is basically more inclusive. So I think the only thing, my only suggestion to staff would be in between, so become members of the regional board through treaty or as observers to our meetings through continued engagement or otherwise, because I believe we are doing engagement. We are engaging. We have a First Nations Relations staff member. So I think that we are doing a continuous engagement piece. And I think that that's where Director Cornfield was going with that, that we are doing that. So if there was another sentence added to our commitment is to continue engaging First Nations or something like that, then maybe that's appropriate. And I would take staff's direction on that, how they would like to kind of add that. I'll put that up.
So if I may, I don't have a hand up function here. I'm at the boardroom. I don't believe that I think that the what's the word? The issue here, as Director Cornfield has indicated, is, and which has to be determined, is whether or not the invitation, so to speak, to be observers will be more broader. As he has indicated, there are First Nations who are not in the treaty process and do not want to go into the treaty process and will not be going into the treaty process. So the question of the hour is, are those First Nations to be included somehow in this draft letter? Do we as a committee want to recommend that yes, we extend that invitation, or no, we don't? That's to me, that's the question of the hour. If we do, then the recommendation is and I think we can you know, if we agree that that is where we want to go, then we refer it back to staff to draft it in terms that would include invitations to other First Nations. And I believe that I agree that that's the route that we should be taking, because the status quo, as I understand it, under our current procedure and legislation, is that those First Nations who are on the treaty path can, in fact, attend as observers. So this letter base, I think, sort of states what the current situation is. The question is, do we want to go further? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I got Director Cornfield and Director Abram after.
Davis as well.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, I
sorry.
just didn't realize there's no hand up function here. I was basically going to say what Director Moglov already said, that we should, in this letter, re-extend the invitation to the First Nations. As far as the wording goes, I personally have no issue with it, because it's allowing for other possibilities in terms between treaty status and members and observer status. So I think it leaves the door open there for other possible interpretations of different ways to engage. But I would like to see an invitation extended to the First Nations within the regional district, and I think some wording in this letter regarding that would be useful. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Director Cornfield?
Okay, I was going to move a change to the letter that I think will make it nice and simple and to the point. And it would be that the last paragraph read, the Strathcona Regional District supports the involvement of other First Nations. Full stop, or at least supports the involvement of other First Nations as observers to our meetings or otherwise, period. Get rid of the false thing that choose to become full members of the regional board, because if they
I'll
choose
second
to
that.
be,
I'll second the amendment so we can speak to it. Thanks.
thank you, Brian. So moved and seconded. My
Yeah.
point of making it is that this makes it very clear, very simple, that we support the involvement of all First Nations as observers to our meetings, period. And then as a result of the relationships that can be built through such involvement, regional district better position. Reads well. Simple change makes it perfectly clear. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I gotta cut in. Just for clarity, happy either way. So we have a motion that was seconded. I personally have a handful of notes based on the comments we have here. Are we in a position now that we just want to make that amendment as Director Cornfield said, or are we thinking about incorporating some of the other comments that we had? Either way, I'm happy. But I would suggest there's two paths here. Either the committee has faith in staff that we'll take those comments and make the amendments, bring them to the board, and or we refer this back to staff based on all the comments and we bring you a fresh copy next meeting.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So those are our options that we have on the floor. And how would we go about?
Well, there is a motion on the floor, which is Mr. Director Cornfield's amendment. And I see that Director Abrams' hand is up, so I can speak after him if that's okay.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Thank you. I'll give the floor to Director Abram.
Thank you, Kevin. I could support the amendment and just do it as is with the additional words in the amendment. If you could read it again, please, so I can hear exactly what it says.
Did you want me to say it?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
whatever.
Please.
Okay.
If it's not written down, then go ahead. Sure.
The third paragraph would then read, the Strathcona Regional District supports the involvement of other First Nations as observers to our meetings or otherwise, period. as a result of the relationship, everything else stays the same. So it just
Okay.
eliminates,
I would suggest that we add to that to show our good intentions from previous years, as we have been doing in the past. Just insert that in there, because we have invited all First Nations in our regional district and the previous regional district. So I think that makes it very clear to the minister that we're very serious about this. We've been doing it, and you know, it's there in black and white.
Okay, if I might,
Thank you, thank you.
Director, are you done finished?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so with, as far as I'm aware, the only First Nations that we've invited to our meetings are those First Nations that are on the treaty path. The purpose of this amendment is to extend that invitation to all First Nations in our region, whether they are on treaty path or not on treaty path. That's two different things. So I think the amendment, as Director Cornfield, is simple and easy. And I would have preferred the words all First Nations in our region as opposed to others, but I guess that's semantics, it's fine. Okay.
I'll take that as a friendly.
Yeah, so all First Nations in the Strathcona Regional District. I think that's, it represents our intention is that we're extending it beyond those First Nations that are on the treaty process. That's the point of the letter, I think, based on the conversation I've heard around this table.
Thank you, thank you. So that would, instead of the word other, you'd want to substitute all First Nations
In the Strathcona
And,
Regional District, yes.
within the Strathcona Regional District, so that, yeah, okay. I think I agree with that as well. Director Abram, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, one last time. Claire, I think you probably were not on the board at the time that we did extend the invitation to all First Nations in the regional district, both SRD and CSRD. So, you know, it is historic, it is not new. And, you know, reiterating it as, you know, no problem with me. I'm just saying that, you know, we have been doing this, and why not tell the province that we have been doing this? I don't know why everybody is, you know, sort of balking at that. It's a real plus for us, I think, as a regional district, that we initially took the steps to do that, to move forward with involvement of First Nations as observers at the table. And though it didn't matter whether they were treaty, non-treaty, never going to go to treaty, whatever. It was all First Nations, period. So I think that's getting lost by not adding it. So do as you wish.
Thank you. Yes,
I have
Director
one-
Cornfield.
I have one last comment, and I don't want to see this held up. I think Director Moglov's friendly amendment that said all First Nations in the Strathcona Regional District makes that clear. I think, you know, where it says, thank you for providing an opportunity to comment on this important matter. Just as a closing thought, you know, previous boards, we weren't the same board at the time, but previous boards did extend invitations before. If it's about recognition from the minister that we did it before, put it in the closing and say this expands on the program that we have been trying to implement for a number of years. Thank you for providing the opportunity. And we could leave it to staff to sort of tweak the closing. I think the key point is that third paragraph as amended.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I think that the one of the things that Director Abram is getting at is that it doesn't want to be forgotten that this has been This has been something that has been ongoing, and it's something that shouldn't be left out, and it should be recognized that this isn't just the beginning process, that this has been an ongoing process. And I see Director Abrams' hand is up.
And thank you for that, Kevin, because that's exactly what I'm trying to say, and I thought it fit perfectly in the motion. If you don't want it in the amendment, fine, put it in the last line. It says the same thing. You're saying exactly the same thing I just said. So what's the difference? You know, do it however you want, just so it gets in there.
Question through to staff, Director Davis, just related. I'm just curious, what was the last time, or sorry, when was the last time that this sort of invitation was extended to our local First Nations?
I can try to answer that if you wish, Mr. Chairman. I don't recall that being extended while the SRD has been in existence. I could be wrong. We'd have to go back and check all the minutes, but it doesn't come to mind a specific invitation being extended to all First Nations in the region, certainly since I have been here. It may have been done before I arrived, but that would be more than 12 years ago. So it would be a while.
Okay, so following this, I'd like to do it as a subsequent.
So just to follow up that, maybe not formally, but I know myself personally, meeting with chiefs and First Nations, and that has certainly been the conversation with them on an ongoing basis, that we encourage them and we're happy to have them participate as observers, have many conversations.
Okay, thanks for that.
Question, I think, then, Mr. Chair?
Yes, question. I'll call question on the motion. Is there any opposed?
On
I
the amendment.
believe on the amendment.
On the amendment, sorry, on the amendment? Is there any opposed? Okay, thank you.
And then the motion as amended, Mr. Chair.
The motion as amended?
If I could just speak to
Oh.
that.
Yes.
And that would be with direction to staff to include the previous history, and I agree that there was a formal thing under the Comox Strathcona Regional District. It has always come up in discussions with individual nations and over the years, as Mr. Leach has said. So the motion that's being moved would include that direction to staff to recognize sort of that this is not a new process for us, but formalizes it, you know, somehow to say what our CAO said and incorporates your comments as chair.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Just
Yes.
question, Mr. Chair, just, or you got something more?
No, question. Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
just call the question.
Okay, question on the floor. Anyone opposed? None, carried. See none carried, so thank you.
So I'll propose a subsequent, if there's
Subsequent motion?
Yeah, just that we once again extend the invitation directly to the First Nations within the regional district that are not currently members to invite them to participate in the regional district, and with the consideration of ultimately joining if they choose to.
Thank you. Is there, okay, awesome. I'll call question. Is there anyone that opposes?
It's,
Discussion first.
it's Director Moglove here. I just think we need to narrow down. I understand the sentiment of it, but only, as far as I know, and so, yeah, I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but only those First Nations that end up in treaty can become full members of the board. And so if the idea here on the subsequent is to invite other First Nations to participate as observers, period, end of sentence, that's fine. But if it's to then also suggest that they might eventually join the board, well, that doesn't, it can't be unless they are en route to treaty. So I think we just have to narrow it down.
Okay, I would accept that as a friendly.
I'm going to second that motion so that we can talk about it.
Good point. Anyway,
I already did.
I think, so I think the sentiment I agree with, but let's just narrow it down. The whole point is to expand our invitation to those First Nations that even if they're not on treaty path, can participate as observers.
That works for me.
Awesome. Okay,
Works for me.
that's great. And any more discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Director Abram.
Yeah, so then the motion sort of amended from Martin's original by Claire is basically that we extend an invitation to all First Nations to,
In the SRD.
in the SRD to, that they are welcome to attend board meetings as observers. And that's really all it needs to say. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I can support that.
All right, thank you. I'll call question. Any opposed? Thank you. Seeing none, moved. So this moves us on to part 2, which is the First Nations governance and relationship building, which I'll hand the floor over to Tina.
I'll move receipt of the report.
I'll second
Oh,
that.
sorry.
No worries.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just providing information on the SRD First Nation Governance and Relationship Building session that is on May 2nd to 4th. It's 2.5 days, starts Monday at noon. It's here in the boardroom. The other 2 days are 8:30 to 4:30. There's facilitators, MC, and some guest speakers. The contents of these sessions finishes the goals of the 2020 FNRC First Nations Relations Committee goals for 2021. And will have discussions and for ideas and planning for goals for 2022. There's a cultural component that has a local elder coming to do a welcome, a song, and a cedar brushing, and he'll close on the last day as well. And an opportunity to, on day 2 during lunch for a Cedar Rose workshop. I'd like to just say that on day 1, that starts at noon, there's 2 guest speakers that are Indigenous lawyers that are experts in their fields on treaty, rights and title, and that's Merle Alexander and Leah George Wilson, and they'll be here doing a presentation. They will be discussing the DRIPA action plan that was just released and Truth and Reconciliation. And they have extensive background on, they both were on the panel for the DRIPA development, and Merle was involved in the action plan as well. The thought is having them on the first day to help set a tone for the other 2 days, and they're encouraging a lot of questions. They want, like, whatever you're thinking, any of those questions that you've always wondered, ask them, have discussions. After their presentations, they're encouraging to have those questions and discussions. And yeah, any questions?
Thank you. I see Director Abram and Director Cornfield have their hand up. Director Abram?
No, that was a mistake, sorry.
All right, all right. Director Cornfield. You are
You did it,
on
John.
mute.
I don't want to belabor the workshop. I support the idea of workshops. But building relationships, as in my opinion, has always come from mutual understanding. To date, I have seen lots that we are getting, and I'm not sure that First Nations are receiving the same back in terms of what are our values, our culture, the resources. I guess what brought it home to me was discussions when we were talking with Clowetzies when they wanted to relocate in to the city, and we had our meeting with the Strathcona Regional District and Clowetzies, and it came down as they wanted to build a home, but a home to First Nations is the village is the home. It's aunties, it's uncles, it's elders, it's that collection together. Whereas ours generally refers to a structure, a building, like this is my home, my house, where I think it's different. So I guess I wanted to know whether or not we are going to have those type of discussions. And it's nice to see that we are getting lawyers that have been involved in UNDREP, because there's some, as a citizen of Canada, I have certain rights and privileges under the charter, one of which is the common property resources and access to those. So I have a right to hunt and fish. It's not a privilege. It may be regulated, but it cannot be extinguished. And that's a right that I have, that I will be exercising for the years that I have left. Is there going to be that kind of discussions sort of allowed at the workshop, especially when they get to DRIPA?
Yes, definitely. And your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions, share them. The floor will be open for those discussions, and they are the right people in the room to be able to help answer some questions that you may have or always wondered about.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I
Thank
won't,
you.
I won't ask them now.
Thank you. I think I'm really looking forward to this to these 2.5 days workshops, and I'm looking forward to hearing any and all questions that you may have for these lawyers, because I think getting as much insight as we can is greatly appreciated, and it opens it up to the board to if they have any questions or anything that they'd be there to answer, and gladfully take your questions. Thank you, Tina. And we did the motion to receive, so
Mr.
that
Chairman,
that was it, correct? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, the motion to receive the report is still on the floor, awaiting a vote.
Waiting to vote. Yes. So I call question, and anyone oppose? Seeing none, carried. Thank you. So that moves us on to correspondence. The Haisla Nation and Kitimat participation in the CEDI program.
I'll move all four
That
pieces of correspondence, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
1, 2, 3, and 4. Thank you.
Second.
That's seconded. Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, I was just going to put my hand up. make sure that through the staff that these will be posted on our director's portal for First Nations examples, like the servicing agreement between Port Coquitlam and Coquitlam.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do automatically put these onto the director's portal as well.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a separate one that we created under First Nations, correct?
I believe so, Mr. Chairman. I would have to check, but I believe we have.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, I'll call question. Is there anyone opposed? Great, thank you. Motion carried. That moves us on to the director's reports. The Pro Salmon Farm Coalition. Motion to receive.
So moved.
Receipt.
Second,
Thank you.
Moglove.
And Director Abram, are you speaking to this one?
I just wanted to present the other side of the picture here. There was a press release by one group of First Nations. It got a lot of coverage in the paper. And then there was a press release by a second group of First Nations that was completely the opposite to the first one. So I felt that, that also needed to get onto our agenda. I believe we had the first one on our agenda, so we should have the second one on our agenda. And I believe I provided it there. So, it changes the picture a bit. There were 17 First Nations in the release that we already received, and in the end, there were only 13 First Nations that agreed, or that weren't adamantly opposed, actually, to being in that first press release. So, just for your information.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Cornfield. I see your hand is up.
Thank you. And I couldn't open the link that was provided for the Peninsula News Review. I think it's really important that what First Nations have been trying to get across, in my understanding, is they wish to make the decision in their territories and not have it forced down. And my understanding of First Nations to Nation protocol is that if a First Nation chooses to, say, oppose aquaculture, it's perceived as their right to oppose. And other First Nations, even the ones that support aquaculture in their territory, will support that nation in their right to determine or make the self-determination of whether they have aquaculture. And I think what's happened in the past is this whole issue has been from both sides tends to try and mobilize all First Nations as if they're all the same. And I think it's about respecting individual nations to make the right, their choice in their territory. And I think we should try and stay clear of that, other than recognizing that we support their right to self-determination. And if they choose to go with fish farms, so be it. That's up to them to make informed consent. So that's my comments on it. I think we should sort of keep out of it.
Thank you. Yes, Director Abram.
Yeah, just, I totally respect Charlie's opinion on this, but I think that it's more than just a First Nation or some First Nations wanting to decide whether or not they support fish farming in their area. There are other things that are involved. Do the local government bylaws support it? Does the provincial government support it? Does the federal government support it? It's multifaceted, and I think that always needs to be kept into account. So opinions from 14 First Nations or 13 First Nations that they're in favor, great. But then you also have a very strong statement from 4 First Nations that they're not in support. So that's all I was trying to provide. I'm sorry, I can't open this this link either. I'm not sure why. It opened fine for me before I sent it to staff to deal with. So something in the passage of time has changed it. It doesn't work. It's independent. You could go to their website, or you could go to, I believe it's called The Star, is the newspaper. And it was on that news item on the news feed from Google News. So you can just look it up if you like.
Mr. Chair, I think you're muted, but I believe we're at question on receipt.
Yes, can I get a question on receipt? Question on receipt. Anyone oppose? None, thank you. Okay, that moves us on to, there's no new business. Addendum items, closed session.
I'll move
No, that
termination.
moves us,
Colburn?
Second, Cornfield.
alrighty. I'll call question. Anyone opposed?
Maybe one of us should say I'm opposed, just to change it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Just,
it's coming along well, Kevin.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good day.
And-
We'll see you soon.
And I look forward to coming there in person next time. I was gonna today, but I sprained my ankle the other day, so I am home. I just got back home from a business trip with my nation.
Kevin, we look forward to seeing you in the
The
office.
process, so I was glad to be back home.
We do have
Yes,
some,
yes.
we do have some documents that need your signature, so whenever you can arrange to come
Okay.
in, that would be just great. Thank you.
Beauty, yes, okay.
Get better soon, Kevin.